It's been 5 years since Native Instruments released the Maschine MK3, and in this video I'm gonna give you my impressions as a long-term user. I'll do a brief overview of the Mark III and give you a summary of its pros and cons. And in the end I'm gonna give you my buying recommendation, mention some alternatives that you can consider. I'm gonna answer the question, should you get the Maschine Mark III or wait for an updated version? Hey, what is going on guys, this is Low Heat and I've been a Maschine user for more than 10 years. I got my first Maschine Mark I in 2010, and this was 1 year after it was released in 2009. The Mark I was sort of revolutionary in that it combined the tactile beat-making aspect of the MPC with the power and flexibility of the computer. And yes, computers and audio interfaces were good enough for this even 12 or 13 years ago, let alone now. So in 2012 it was updated to the Mark II version, which was not a big update, but rather a refinement of the Mark I. It added RGB pad lights and better screens, although they were still monochromatic and you still had to use a separate audio interface as it didn't have one built in. Somewhere around that time, Native Instruments released version 2.0 of the software, which felt a touch more complicated than version 1 when using it on the hardware controller interface, which was the same as the Maschine Mark I. So in 2017 the Mark III was released with a very slick, redesigned hardware interface. Big bright color displays borrowed from the larger Maschine Studio, even bigger and better pads, and last but not least, a built-in high-quality audio interface. And Maschine Plus was the logical continuation of this when it was released in 2020 with the exact same form factor, user interface and workflow, with the main difference being that you didn't need a computer to use it. And so what is the main selling point of the Maschine Mark III? You get the best of both worlds. You have the flexibility and the convenience of the computer with all the sounds and plugins that you have on it, but at the same time it feels like a standalone groovebox or drum machine. You can do everything from the controller. Load kits and sounds, sequence them, quantize, erase and edit patterns and MIDI notes, record and edit samples, add and tweak effects, even reorder the effects in your chain and also create an entire arrangement. The only thing you need to use a keyboard for is naming your projects before you save them. But after you do this, you can save and load projects from the controller, and even stuff like selecting your audio driver, setting your buffer size, etc. This can all be done from the controller. So how about the build quality of the Mark III? It is super nice, reassuringly heavy, and yes, the faceplate is made of plastic, but it's not plasticky at all. It's very sturdy and the base is made out of metal. The pads are amazing, probably the best pads that you'll ever get. Great feel and sensitivity, and their bigger size allows for easy velocity control by hitting them closer to the center where they are more sensitive or towards the edge where they are a bit less sensitive. Knobs are smooth and buttons have a nice soft click to them and feel great too. What about the built-in audio interface? It's pretty decent and on par with any budget audio interface. The only con here is the lack of XLR input with phantom power for condenser mics. But I suppose this is due to the space and power limitations, since Maschine Mark III works just fine using only USB power. So where are we now in 2022, 2023 and beyond? The Maschine platform is better and stronger than ever, and there are 3 facts that indicate that the Mark IV isn't really on the horizon, at least not for the next year or so. First of all, NI have already announced all of their products for 2022. They usually do it in September and October, so if there was a new machine, it would have already been announced. Second, the Maschine Plus is still relatively new and it uses the exact same form factor, interface and workflow, which makes it unlikely that NI are gonna switch to anything new and revolutionary so soon. And third, Native Instruments have just released 2 long instructional videos on how to use everything in the Maschine Mark III, so it's obvious that they wouldn't go through the trouble of making them if a new model was just around the corner. By the way, if you find this video useful, make sure to hit the like button down there, and if you want to get notified when I drop new videos, subscribe to the channel and enable the notifications by hitting the bell down there. I do tutorials, beat making videos, product reviews, and generally content related to sampling, sound design, and production of hip-hop and electronic music. Okay, time to discuss the pros and cons of the Mark III. First of all, the pros. It has an incredibly fast and fun tactile workflow. Super tight integration with the Maschine software. It feels like you're working on a standalone Groovebox. And no wonder NI used the exact same interface for their actual standalone Maschine Plus. A clean and well-organized interface. It's a good middle ground between simplicity and flexibility. It's not too limited, but also not stuffed with features that make it too complex or overwhelming. It has a huge variety of great sounds bundled and available as paid expansions and plugins, and also great integration with the complete bundle from Native Instruments. The sounds are well organized and tagged in the browser, which makes it easy to find what you're looking for. This includes presets from third-party plugins which support the NKS standard. And besides all the bread and butter stuff that you would expect a product of this type to have, you have some great creative effects and performance features. Okay, so now let's talk about the cons. And to be honest, these are all about the Maschine software. I can't really find any significant cons with the hardware. And also for the cons, I would say it depends on what you consider this product to be. If you consider this to be a DAW or a replacement for a DAW, I would say there are many cons of the Maschine software compared to an actual more feature-rich or more complete DAW. Some of them are the lack of proper audio tracks. Audio recording is done through the sampling section, and while it does record audio without the need to use the sampler, it's not as convenient as having actual audio tracks. Not flexible enough linear arrangement view, and even though clips were introduced that improved the arranger quite a bit, it's still not as powerful and flexible as a proper DAW. Also, there is no detailed audio clip editing as you would find on a DAW, and so all of these mean that you would probably need to transfer your tracks to an actual DAW for arranging and mixing. So this is the last con that I can think of, having to transfer the tracks to a DAW, but to be honest, this isn't really a disadvantage of just Maschine. This is true for any Groovebox or sampler. So Maschine isn't a DAW, and frankly, I think it doesn't need to be, because adding all the features necessary to call it a complete DAW will inevitably detract from the clean, fast, and intuitive workflow. So if you consider this to be a Groovebox or a sampler, which is what I think it is, there are a couple of cons, but I don't think they're really that big. You can't record pad mutes or track mutes. I personally don't really care about this, but I see people mention it all the time, so I thought it's worth mentioning here. Some people obviously need that feature. Weirdly, you can't turn stereo samples into mono. So if you are, let's say, sampling a song and you only have a guitar on the left channel, there is no way to make it come out of both channels using the built-in tools, but you can of course use a stereo imaging plugin for this. And you also can't load MP3 files to use as samples. Some features I wish it had, but I wouldn't really say they are cons, but it would be nice to have them. Real-time time stretch in the sampler, so you can play samples up and down the keyboard like in Ableton Live's Simpler without changing their length. As far as I know, this option is a bit more CPU intensive, so that may be the reason we don't have it yet. And personally, I would like to see more filter options, some analog modeled filters, like we have them in Contact, so having some of them in the Maschine sampler would be nice, but it's not something essential. So is the Maschine Mark III worth it in 2022 or 2023? It is absolutely worth it if this is the type of product that you need. It gives you an amazingly fast and fun tactile workflow, but as with any product of its kind, some people just prefer to start and finish their projects in a proper DAW to avoid having to transfer their tracks into the DAW, or they just require more editing features right from the beginning of creating their tracks. But the only way to know if it's really for you is to just get one and try it. For me, it does what I need it to do, and I'm not one of those people complaining that it lacks this feature or that feature. And you should always buy a product based on what it can do now. Don't buy something expecting to have certain features added in a future update, because this very often leads to disappointment. So for me personally, I got what I paid for and I'm happy with it. And yes, if you decide to buy it, I've got affiliate links down in the description of the video, which helps support the channel if you buy something from these links. But you can also get a second-hand one, and just make sure that the seller transfers the software license to you, as it's pretty much useless if you don't have the Maschine software. There are some alternatives like the MPC one from Akai, and it's actually a really great deal considering that it costs just a little more than the Maschine Mark III, but it's actually standalone and works without a computer. However, the workflow and interface isn't really as fast and clean, and I've got a video explaining this in more detail. Another alternative is the Micro Mark III, which is much cheaper, but it loses the displays and hardware controls are reduced significantly, which makes it less attractive in my humble opinion, since you have to rely on using the Maschine software with the mouse. And like I said, the hardware integration and mouseless workflow are the main selling point of the Maschine Mark III. Ableton Push 2 is another good alternative. I've compared it to the Mark III in an older video, which I will link in the description, but it may not be as suitable if your main DAW is not Ableton Live. And so that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and hope to see you in the next one.